Well, welcome everybody. We have kind of a small group today. Let me put this on full screen here. So for the recording, we can actually see the handout. Today, I'm going to talk about just an introduction to healthy eating. And I think often we have a misguided idea about what is healthy. I'm just amazed when I work with people one-on-one, how many say, oh yeah, I eat a pretty healthy diet. And then we start digging in and it's like, I think there's some places where we can make some changes here. And the whole point of eating healthier is to just do one more thing better than you were doing. So it's not about getting it perfect. It's not about doing it all right. It's about just making one change at a time. That's a healthier change from what you were doing. And so I tell people, if you only can make one change in how you eat, it's better than what you were doing before. So good job. So let's start off talking about just what is a standard American diet. And isn't it interesting that the acronym for standard American diet is SAD? Because the standard American diet is very, very sad. It's why I think we have so many chronic diseases, so many chronic health complaints, so much cancer, so much joint pain. I mean, if people ate a healthier diet, you guys would be a lot less busy, which wouldn't be so good for you guys here. But we'd have a lot healthier people. So one of the authors, I brought some books today, and when I'm finished, I'll show you some of these books that if you're interested in more information on this topic, some references that you might be able to find at the library, or if you want to order them or buy them. But one of the authors, and I don't recall, I think it's Michael Pollan in his book In Defense of Food, says that we don't eat real food in this country. In Western society, we eat food-like substances. And the example of this would be cereal, breakfast cereal that's high in omega-3 fatty acids. There's nothing in the breakfast cereal that's high in omega-3 fatty acids. It's been added to it. It's like orange juice that's high in calcium. It's been added to it. Milk that's high in vitamin D. It's been added to it. Those are food-like substances. And he says we need to be eating real food that has real nutrients that haven't been added. And so we're going to get to that. I'm going to go through a whole bunch of sort of different topics related to what is healthy eating, and we'll eventually get to what does a healthy diet look like. But know that a standard American diet is typically calorie dense, it's nutrient poor. So the analogy that I use is like putting sugar water in your gas tank of your car. If I suggested that you put sugar water in the gas tank of your car, how far do you think your car would go before it putters out?
Not very far.
Not very far. You're exactly right. But we expect our engine, our motor, our energy making equipment to do just exactly that with basically sugar, white flour and sugar and processed foods. So just like the car, we can't expect our bodies to go very far and do very well if we're feeding it just these empty calories that are nutrient poor. Our bodies, if you've ever taken biochemistry, you know that we need nutrients in order for all the biochemical processes to do what they need to do. And if you don't have them, one by one, those biochemical processes will stop working because the body's going to triage the nutrient. It's going to use the nutrient if there's not enough for the life-threatening, life-sustaining type processes in the body. And then if there's just not enough, maybe you lose your hair. If there's not enough, maybe you'll get acne. If there's not enough, maybe you'll have some GI upset. You won't die because the body triages unless you really get to the place where you're just deficient, have been for a long time, in a lot of different nutrients. It can lead to some chronic disease. So just let that be known that a lot of the different things that we see can be related to nutrient deficiencies. And if we can provide those nutrients, preferably through diet, but there is a place for supplements, we can sometimes turn some of those processes around and people can just be healthier. So the standard American diet is also highly inflammatory. And one of the programs that I've done here in this course series is on the inflammation connection, which is just what do we do in our diet that leads to a lot of inflammation and how can you make some changes there? So, but it is highly inflammatory and it leads to a lot of diseases like diabetes, obesity, cancer, heart disease, just a whole list of other things that the list is really endless. So standard American diet's not real good for us. It's a diet that we really need to change. The problem is the standard American diet has our name in it. We're Americans and it's our diet. And it's really, we need to change that so that we have a standard American diet that is not so sad, that is just got more nutritional value. So the next thing on your handout here talks about ultra processed foods. And this comes from an article that just talks about, it was looking at what happens when people eat an ultra processed diet. And so I just pulled some of the definitions out of this article about ultra processed foods. So people think, okay, well, what are the kinds of foods I need to avoid? And they are the foods in this category of ultra processed. And what happens when they process foods is typically it removes a lot of the nutritional value because things that have, for instance, have a lot of omega-3 fatty acids, which are more anti-inflammatory, they get rancid quicker. They're not shelf stable very long. And so that's why we need to eat fresh foods, because really healthy foods that have all their nutrients that naturally occur in them are just not stable very long. You know, fruit gets rotten pretty quick, right? You can't have it sitting around on your shelf for 2 years. Oh, what's the expiration date on this orange? I think it was about 1.5 years ago, right? So anyway, ultra processed foods, the majority of calories we consume in this country are from ultra processed foods. Well, what are they? They're defined as cheap. They're industrial sources of dietary energy and nutrients plus additives. Okay, you think about that. Industrial sources of dietary energy and nutrients plus additives. So there's an example here that I use before I go on of a study they did, and they looked at different kinds of wheat flour that and its effect on inflammation. So they did, I don't know which marker they looked at, but one of the markers for inflammation. And they looked at whole wheat flour, they looked at white enriched flour, which if you buy gold medal flour, it's white and it's been enriched with nutrients. They've added in iron, folic acid, thiamine, maybe some others, but those for sure. And they looked at white unenriched flour. So white unenriched is flour where they've removed the bran and the germ, but they haven't added back those nutrients to them that have been removed when we remove the bran and the germ. Interestingly, but not surprisingly, what they saw, the lowest inflammatory response in people who ate the whole wheat flour. So less inflammation because you're getting some of those good healthy fats in there. You get the fiber, nutrients, and all of that. What was surprising to me, though, is what had the highest inflammatory response. The highest inflammatory response was the white enriched flour. Okay, so the white unenriched flour, where they actually had removed some nutrients from it and didn't put them back in, was actually in the middle. So what happens there is, you know, we thought we knew best. We removed a lot of the nutrients when we processed it, made it white, and then we turned around and added some things back to it, and that actually caused more inflammation. So typically, these products have long shelf life. They're relatively safe from contamination, and they're convenient. They're often ready to eat or ready to heat. So, you know, you buy something in a bowl, you peel the top off, put it in the microwave, and you've got lunch in 30 seconds or a minute. Now, that's not universally true, but sort of generally speaking. Yeah, Kathy.
So, like if we get whole wheat flour to make, let's just say pizza, it always calls for some white flour to mix with it. Is there some other way?
Well, one of the things I talk about in, I think I talk about the inflammation connection is wheat's not real good for us, period. Wheat is just a problem. It's a big inflammatory food for us. When they harvest wheat anymore, they spray glyphosate on it 2 to 3 days before they harvest it, because I was just talking with someone about this yesterday about how they spray glyphosate on wheat. They do it because it dries. Used to be when they harvested wheat, they went through one pass and they cut the wheat, and then they let it dry for a few days, and then they came back and they picked up the wheat and processed it. Well, they found that if they sprayed it with glyphosate while it's still standing, it dries it out really quickly, and they can just make one pass through the field and be done. They just cut it, and it just goes like when they pick corn and beans, it just goes into a hopper right then and there. And so you're getting a lot of glyphosate when you eat wheat. And so there's been an explosion in gluten sensitivity in the last 20 years. And they think that maybe part of that explosion in gluten sensitivity is the glyphosate residues on wheat that are left. So maybe it's not the wheat, maybe it's not the gluten, maybe it's the glyphosate. So I mean, personally, I don't tolerate wheat at all. I don't tolerate gluten. Some people tolerate it just fine, but that's for now. So I really encourage people to stay away from wheat. There's a lot of other flours, and you can still use some, but we eat it every day, every meal, in everything. You know, we have toast and muffins and bread and pizza and pasta, and it's all got wheat in it. So it's basically a multiple time a day food, and we can almost always count on getting into trouble when we eat the same food day in and day out, meal after meal, especially when it's inflammatory to start with.
Glyphosate, Glycosate.
Glypho, it's Glyphosate. It's actually just Roundup glyphosate, but it's a chemical spray they put on it.
Wow.
Yeah, pesticide, herbicide, I don't know which.
Dad would not be happy because
Yeah.
he used to do wheat and never did that. But one more question.
Yeah.
What about your bars?
bars, like meal bars, nutritional bars.
Yeah, nutritional bars.
Well, you have to be kind of careful because they're processed. Most of them, they're food-like substances. You look, it has soy protein isolate, it has rice syrup, it has high fructose corn syrup. It has food like, there's nothing recognizable really in it. You can't look at it and say, I know what this in here, or you look at the list of ingredients and it's a lot of chemicals. So you do need to be careful. There are some bars that I recommend to people. I like the RX bars. Those are paleo friendly. I like the Lara bars. Those are real food. In fact, their simplest Lara bar is cashew cookie, and it's just cashews and dates, I think is all it's in it. So they're real food. It is, I'm going to talk about food processing here in just a minute, but it's food that's real food that's just been, put together. It's like making a recipe. It's like if I'm going to make, something from scratch at home versus buying it in an industrial package.
For chemicals, 'cause I have some bars here.
Yeah, after we're done, let me look at them and
Yeah.
let's just see. Or actually, do you want to, let me take a look at one of them and let's just see what the ingredients are on it. You don't mind me picking on you?
No, I don't care. I'm sure they have 3 different kinds.
Okay, well, let's take a look and see. So one of them is called an IQ bar. Well, this one is paleo friendly. That's always a good clue that it might be better than some of the other choices. So this one is still going to qualify. I wouldn't call this paleo friendly because it has pea protein. Legumes are not considered paleo. This is probably better than some of the other choices that are out there, but it also has, let's see. I think the pea protein is probably the biggest issue in here. Not that that's a terrible problem, but this one's not too bad. This one's called Love Good Fats. Let's see what's in this one. The other thing you can look for is if it has a long list of ingredients. Like Lara bars, there's maybe 2 or 3 or 4 ingredients. RX bar is the same, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 ingredients. This one starts off with a fats blend, chocolate flavored coating, brown rice protein. So this is going to be a food-like substance. They've taken a lot of different industrialized ingredients and combined them and called them food in this one. And the Premier Protein, let's see what this one's, I'm guessing this probably has soy protein isolate. A lot of these high protein bars do. Yeah, first ingredient, soy protein isolate, which soy, unless it's organic, is going to be GMO. So not the best choice.
Soy protein isolate is bad.
Well, it's not food. It's a food additive. So palm kernel oil, hydrolyzed gelatin, whey protein, partially defatted peanut flour. So this one's going to be a highly processed, what I would call food-like substance. This is the Premier Protein. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks for letting me look at those. I have a bar in my, I usually carry one in my purse. I don't know if I have one right now. That's the Lara bar, and I'm just gonna just see how many. It's the peanut butter cookie one. I know what I must have eaten, and I don't have it in there. I usually try to keep one in there when I get away from home. So, okay. So let's if you have questions, please do as Kathy did and just ask me as we're going. Consumption of these kinds of ultra processed foods facilitates overeating. They're foods that are designed to trigger an appetite for more of them. So it's a great marketing trick. You get started on these and you're like, oh, that was really good. I'm gonna have some more. I found a really great snack at Aldi. It's a cashew coconut cookie. It's in the snack section. Have you found those?
Little flat ones?
Yep, little flat round ones. They are delicious. They're paleo. Oh, and they have a caramel sea salt, and they have an almond one, and there's a chocolate one. And you can have 8 of them as one serving. And they all are pretty good, wholesome ingredients. I mean, granted, they've been, what do you call them? Mashed up and dispersed, they've been chopped up, but it's all real food. But I have a hard time with
What's it called?
they're called cashew cookie crisps, I think. And if you go to where the snack foods are, like the cookies and that, they're in there, and it's in a little pouch that you tear off and it's resealable.
Keto too. I think call them keto.
I think they're.
Yeah, I think they're keto
labeled
friendly.
keto,
Yeah, keto friendly, paleo friendly. They use coconut palm sugar, which is a lower glycemic index. So you can still have degrees of healthy food that's still processed, but it's a little bit healthier than some of the other choices. So, but anyway, that facilitates overeating in these. So I have to be kind of careful with those.
What
Yeah.
about the Wassa crackers that are out?
What are they called?
Wassa?
I'm not familiar with those.
Oh, I should have brought one.
But I guess most crackers are grain based.
This has multi-grains in it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd have to just look at the ingredient list and see, because I'm not familiar with those. Typically, these foods are high in calories, salt, fat, and sugar. And one of the books I brought is called The End of Overeating, Taking Control of the Insatiable North American Appetite by David Kessler. It is a book where he talks about how in the standard American diet, we layer salt on fat on sugar on all, like salt on sugar on fat on salt on sugar on fat, salt on sugar on fat, salt on sugar on salt. I mean, he talks about, and those are the ingredients that lead us to overeat. And so that book is really an interesting read about how we've engineered food in this country to facilitate overeating. I mean, it's really easy to eat the whole bag. Whereas if you're eating tortilla chips, I mean, think about Doritos versus tortilla chips. It's really easy to overeat Doritos, right? You could eat a whole bag of Doritos. It's really, most people don't overeat chips unless you're in a Mexican restaurant, because it's just different. You have to chew them more. They have more texture. They're not so habit forming, because that again is mostly just ground up corn and some oil and some salt. And so it's real food. So it just doesn't have that same sort of property where it just makes you want to eat the whole bag.
The tortillas, did you say stay away from corn?
Tortilla chips. Corn is a grain and it's pretty inflammatory for a lot of people. Yeah.
So what about the tortilla chips? Should we stay away from that?
Well, Siete has a nice brand of tortilla chips that are grain free.
Who is that?
Siete, that's the number 7 in Spanish, SIETE. They have a whole line of grain free products and they're made from cassava flour. And they are quite good. They have a lot of different choices. They have some churro strips, which are cinnamon and coconut sugar that are, again, that's one of those, it's hard for me to just not eat the whole bag. So I have to be careful, but they are healthier for me because they don't have any grains. I just stay away from the grains.
Siete?
Yeah, because I don't do well. Hy-Vee carries them. Natural Grocers has them. So these foods are engineered to have super appetitive properties that can lead to pathological eating disorder, which is what we've been talking about. And they're made primarily from white flour, sugar, and industrialized seed oils. So not good ingredients. So let's talk about Brazil has a food categorization system called NOVA. And I really like this way of categorizing foods because it helps you think about what you're going to choose to eat, which categories it in. It's pretty easy to tell most of the time. And I tell people you should choose foods from primarily class 1 and class 2. And if you get into class 3, like those cashew cookie things from Aldi would be probably a class 3. Maybe it's a 4. But anyway, class 1 is a food that's unadulterated in any way. So an example here would be an apple, right? You just get the apple out of the fridge, you just eat it. That nothing's been done to it. You have to be kind of careful about pesticides because that has had something done to it. So apples are on the dirty dozen list. So you may want to look at that when you're buying fresh fruits and vegetables. So you're staying away from pesticides and residues and stuff. But anyway, it's pretty easy to tell if the food's been unadulterated. Class 2 is a food that's been mechanically dispersed. So an example would be apple slices. So just cut it up and maybe they've been peeled. Okay. Class 3 has had something removed or added. So this would be applesauce would be the example here. So applesauce, you remove the fiber from it, you remove the peel from it. So it's
Are you here for a work step?
Oh, I'm here for a drug test.
Okay, next door.
Oh.
well, he's going to be on our recording. Good thing he's confidential. That's why. Okay, so applesauce. So we've removed a lot of the fiber from it. We've removed the peel. But applesauce, if you don't add any sugar to it, still not a bad choice, but it's going to affect your blood sugar more than eating an apple where you've got all that fiber and you've got that peel still. And if the peel's red, you're going to get some more antioxidants in the peel because antioxidants are only in brightly colored fruits and vegetables.
When, like those apple slices, don't they put something on them or in the packaging to make them stay fresh?
They do. And
Okay,
at
so-
McDonald's, if you buy apple dippers, they use vitamin C.
Oh.
So when I make apples, look, if I'm going to cut them and take them to a party or something with a dip, I'll mix, I have some vitamin C powder. I would just mix in a little water and put on there. You can use a little orange juice. You could use a little lemon juice, anything like that. You don't have to, but sometimes they will put some sort of a chemical to keep them from turning brown. So you're going to want to read the label and see what's been used as the antioxidant. So yeah, Kathy.
So if that's on the dirty dozen, though, would it be better that we peel the apple?
No, because when they test these fruits and vegetables, they've peeled them and they've washed them. And they still, strawberries are number one. They have been for 4 years now. Apples are like 3 or 4. So,
So what about, okay, if we go to the grocery store and we buy a salad, for
Mhm.
example, the lettuce is cut, the carrots are cut, and the cabbage is cut.
mhm.
Is that bad, or is it better for me to go buy a whole head of lettuce?
Well, it depends. If
Carrots
if you
and
know
do my own
what's,
cutting.
if you know what's in there, the other thing is, to look at the Dirty Dozen list. I have the Dirty Dozen list as a icon on my phone here on my desktop, so I can go right to it really quickly. Kale or spinach is number 2 on the Dirty Dozen list. So if your salad has spinach in it, probably you'd want to make sure it's organic, unless you just didn't have a choice. Kale, collard, and mustard greens are number 3. So if there's any kale in your salad, again, you probably want it to be organic. Lettuce is number 17. So, if everything else, if lettuce is the highest number, it's the dirtiest thing that's in there and it's number 17. I get salads out all the time. I go to Culver's and get a salad. Sometimes I get a salad at Hy-Vee because I work there. So, it's one of those things that when I can control it, I buy organic romaine lettuce. That's my choice. But if I'm eating out, now the only time I'll eat strawberries that are not organic is if I don't have a choice. If I'm at somebody's house and they're serving me strawberries, or it's my best choice at the restaurant, I'll choose strawberries without saying, no, are these organic? Because, they're in the Dirty Dozen list. I don't go quite that far. But you could certainly choose not to eat strawberries because they're on the Dirty Dozen list out if you're just not sure. Hi there.
Hi,
You here for the program?
no, I'm here for an appointment.
Oh, okay. So, well, we're recording the program, so just so you know, don't say anything you don't want on the recording, okay? Okay, so let's see, what was the question? Oh, about the
I was
dirty
just
lettuce, the
asking-
lettuce salad, yeah.
Yeah, so, go to Walmart,
Mhm.
get some of their grab a couple salads. and-
You're talking about the pre-mixed ones in the bag?
Mhm.
Well, personally, I would probably choose only organic ones like that. But if you're choosing a whole bunch of the stuff in the Dirty Dozen list, which is 1 through 12, that's organic, maybe it doesn't matter, because like potatoes are on the Dirty Dozen list. And when I buy potatoes, I do not buy organic because organic potatoes are about the size of a golf ball. And so it's really hard to peel a whole bunch of potatoes that are the size of a golf ball. So that's one that I choose not to. I just choose to buy regular baking potatoes. So they're big and I can peel them easily. But there are some that I don't compromise on at home. So, and then number 4, class 4 is the matrix of the food has been destroyed and other ingredients have been added for palatability. And the example here would be apple pie. So one of the bars you had, Kathy, that pure protein ice one would be in this class 4, along with some of the others. So just be oh goodness. Okay, so anyway, class 4 is a category that you want to avoid. This is the category that, they add a lot of sugar. I mean, think about apple pie. They've got the wheat crust, there's all that sugar or high fructose corn syrup. There's probably a thickener in there that, there's just all sorts of stuff in there.
And it's so good.
Exactly. It is so good. And that's this whole thing about the end of overeating, the name of his book. They do that for a reason, because they know you're going to overeat the foods. They know you're going to come back and buy them again. They know they taste good. They also know they're not good for you, but that's not that. I mean, of course, they're not going to advertise, yeah, eat this food. It's not good for you. They want you to buy their products. So let's get to what does a whole food diet look like instead of what does it not look like. It includes eating foods as close to their natural state as possible, primarily class 1 and 2 on that NOVA scale. One option is called an ancestral diet, a hunter-gatherer diet, a Paleolithic diet. Those are all going to be, or paleo for short, ways that describe eating foods that you can hunt, pick, and dig. Okay, so if you think about caveman diet, which is another name for that way of eating, there are things they could hunt, pick, and dig, which are not grains, not processed foods. It's foods that are, plants and animal source foods. So these foods are high in nutrients, which is what we want. We want a nutrient-rich diet, and then the calories usually will take care of themselves. Includes meat, fish, poultry, preferably grass-fed, free-range, or wild-caught, because these sources are going to be less inflammatory. And this is talked about in Michael Pollan's book, In Defense of Food and Eater's Manifesto, which I quote him quite a bit. This actually changed how we eat. We ate pretty close to a vegetarian diet for a long time. And I read Michael Pollan's book and realized that the quality of the meat you eat is far more important than the quantity that you eat. And when they've done all these studies where they looked at red meat and how people eat red meat have higher risk of cancer, higher risk of heart disease, higher risk of, whatever else, they don't look at the quality of the red meat they're eating. These people are probably eating McDonald's hamburgers, which that's red meat, right? They're eating traditionally raised beef. They're eating farm raised fish and, caged chicken and, just food that's the quality is really poor. So there really has not been an effort to sort out. Well, I take that back. There have been a few studies I've seen, but they don't make it to the mainstream media that say that, you can eat a little bit of traditionally raised beef and be more unhealthy than someone who eats a lot of grass-fed ground beef, for instance. And Aldi is a great place to get grass-fed beef. I was just there yesterday. They had ground beef, 2 different fat percentages. They had steaks that were grass-fed, and they had, sometimes they have roasts that are grass-fed. So they also have pastured chicken, which has been out eating the grass and the bugs. So that's a great place to get some of those kinds of meats. Yeah.
What do you think about like dried fruits and, is that a good thing to eat versus, instead of eating like an, let's say, a real apricot off the tree versus a dried apricot?
That's a good question. Real apricot off the tree is going to be healthier for you because the sugar is not so concentrated. The problem with dried fruits are, like, if you have a sweet craving, one of the things I suggest to people is eat dates. Eat a couple dates. You want sweet? That's sweet. And that has nothing added to it. It's just a dried, it's just a date that's been dried. And well, I use them in baking. I take the pit out of them and I put them in a blender, and they're really sweet and they make some really nice sweet baked goods. If you do a paleo carrot cake, a paleo this, that, or the other thing, sometimes they'll use dates for sweeteners. But eat a date. Just know there's a pit in the middle. You need to take it out. Don't bite down on it. Eat dried apricots as an example. Those are sulfited, so they're going to have sulfites added to them to keep them from getting brown. If you buy unsulfured apricots, they're brown, which is fine. But they just
usually they have sugar added, or
some of them do. Sometimes you can find them without added sugar, but if they don't have any added sugar, it isn't okay. But just don't overeat them. With dates, eat 2 maybe. If that's, enough, gives you enough sweet. With apricots, just eat 1 or 2 or 3. Don't eat a half a bag because it is a lot of sugar. Even though it's naturally occurring, it's still very concentrated. And that's where we get into problems with big blood sugar spikes. So.
But you said I should look for brown ones?
Well, they're called unsulfured. So they don't have any sulfites added to them to keep them from turning brown. And I found a bag at Costco once, and I don't buy them anymore. And I'm sure you can find them if you just look around for them. So nuts and seeds, eggs, vegetables are all foods that are going to be important in a whole foods diet. People I've heard complain that paleo is not a healthy way to eat, or caveman diet, because it's meat based and meat's not good for you. Well, I already said the quality of the meat matters, but it is a plant-based diet, because I recommend 8 to 10 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. That is a lot of fruits and vegetables, and then just moderate servings of meat. And if you look at the Blue Zones book, which that's been around now for, 15 years or so, one of the things they found in these zones where people live to be over 100 at higher than normal expected rates is that they use meat as a condiment, and they eat these plant-based diets. So they do have some animal source protein, but it's not a 12-ounce steak. You go to these restaurants, some of them 16-ounce steaks. My goodness, that's enough for 3 people easily. That's just a lot of protein. We don't need that much, unless we're bodybuilders, or, most of us aren't. So foods that would be consumed occasionally or not at all include refined sugar, which would be a not at all if I had my choice. But admittedly, I do eat a small amount of refined sugar. I use ketchup with refined sugar in it. I have some ice cream I like that has some refined sugar. So dairy, legumes, grains, and industrial seed oils, which include corn and soybean. All of these foods are going to be inflammatory, and dairy is an exception. Some people do okay with dairy. If it's fermented dairy, if it's organic, if it's full fat, you're probably okay if you tolerate it. So again, it's quality over quantity in that case. A lot of these foods are at the root of inflammation and chronic lifestyle diseases such as obesity and diabetes. And eating a whole foods diet is anti-inflammatory and has the potential to reverse some of these chronic diseases caused by processed foods diet. So I've seen many a chronic disease or health complaint reversed when people just make a change in their diet, lose weight. It's just people feel better, they sleep better, they have more
I just came
energy.
from the doctor.
Yeah.
That's why she made me come.
Oh, so there's a method to her madness. Ah,
So, my sugars are elevated
oh,
and,
mhm.
my blood pressure is elevated too.
Yeah,
so-
those are lifestyle diseases that are very responsive in my experience to diet changes. And again, you don't have to do it all at once, but the more changes you can make, the better off you're going to be in the long term. So, yeah, Kathy.
Why is dairy and legumes bad?
Well, legumes are not always bad. I eat legumes, but they can be a gut irritant. They have something in them called lectins, which can cause problems for some people.
Lectins?
Lectin, Lectin. They're a lipopolysaccharide, and they are a great source of fiber, but some people just don't tolerate them. So if you do tolerate them, it's fine. And I do seem to tolerate them okay, so I do eat some legumes. But when I have people do a 30-day elimination diet, I have them remove legumes just to see, and then we bring them back and try them. And then your other question was about dairy, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's quality over quantity, and it's about whether you tolerate it. If you have a lactose intolerance, you may not tolerate it. If you have a problem with casein or whey, which are the proteins in there, you probably don't do well with dairy. So there's a lot of non-dairy alternatives you can do instead. But if you're going to do dairy, do the full fat and do organic if you can afford it, because then you've eliminated the pesticides and the contaminants, the antibiotics, and some of that sort of stuff that's in there. So. Okay. Well, it's going to be the same thing. A lot of yogurts are full of sugar. A lot of yogurts are full of sugar. Look at the sugar content on some of these. It is outrageous.
How about the grape?
Same thing. You just
Grape
look at
can
the
do that?
look at the sugar content. Almost all the fruit flavored ones have just mega tons of sugar in them.
I don't.
If you do plain, then do the full fat and organic. Mhm. Yeah. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about briefly is time restricted eating. And I was going to talk in some more detail, but in interest of time, I'm going to just be real brief here. If people want more information, you can come talk to me. But one of the things that if you look at historically, there's something called the NHANES, which is a survey they do nationwide about people's eating habits in the United States. And in 1977, in NHANES, the study looked at Americans, how many times a day they ate. They ate on average 3 times a day. So this would have been in my growing up years. We ate breakfast, lunch, supper, and guess what? We came home from school, we wanted a snack. Nope, you're going to ruin your dinner. You wait till supper. Well, that isn't the way it is anymore, right? Because in 2004, Americans ate on average 6 times a day. Okay, so that's 3 meals and 3 snacks. So that's a big problem. There was a study done where they looked at how many times a day that someone ate and over how many hours they ate. And what they found is that the person who ate in the top 10% of periods of time and how over how long and how many times they ate 10 times a day over 14 3/4 hours. So if you think about 14 3/4 hours, if you do the math, if they get up at 7, how late are they still eating? 9:45, right? There is no time from the time they get up to the time they go to bed, they are not eating. That's a big, big, big problem in terms of blood sugar, weight. So anyway, what they did was they took these people that were in the top 10% and they said, okay, instead of eating over 14 hours, we want you to just eat what you've been eating. Don't have to change anything, but do it over 11 hours. So if you start at 7, you have to stop at 6. So 11 hours. It was really interesting. What they found is that that's all the change they made. They lost on average 7.2 pounds just by eating over 3 to 4 hours less time than what they were eating. So interesting findings.
How long they do that for?
I don't remember. I have to go back and pull the original article. I have it with me and I could look and see. But I don't know how long they did that for. It's a good question.
Is that what they consider fasting then? Like,
So
when you're-
intermittent time restricted eating or intermittent fasting means you have a period of time where you have to break your fast. And what that means is, if you're eating over 14 3/4 hours now and you get it down to 10 or 11, that's a great change. I applaud you. There's another study I just want to mention briefly. They had two groups of people and they did both arms. So one arm ate from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and one arm ate from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. And you were in this group and then you waited a while and then you went and ate the way this group did. So both groups ate both ways. And they ate 3 meals a day of the same foods in both groups. And they found all sorts of things that changed. Insulin levels dropped, insulin resistance dropped, blood pressure went down. There was less desire to eat and capacity. So less capacity, they felt full more quickly when they ate over 8 for the 8 to 2, which is only 6 hours. That's a really, really short time frame. Some people like that. I find a couple days a week that I wait to eat breakfast till about 10 or 10:30. So I eat my supper usually around 6-ish. And then if I don't eat until 10 o'clock the next morning, that's a 16-hour fast. That's time restricted eating. I'm limiting what I eat from 10 a.m. till about 6 p.m. So I'm eating over only 8 hours a day instead of eating from the time I get up to the time I go to bed. So it's just a mindful way to eat. I think that, okay, how many hours am I eating over and how many times a day am I eating? Because every time you eat something that drives up your blood sugar and fall, you get a spike in inflammation. Spike in blood sugar equals spike in inflammation. So if you're eating 10 times a day, you've got these spikes going all day long of blood sugar and inflammation. And so if you can eat 3 times a day or even just 4, you've got much fewer spikes, much less inflammation. And so, yeah, just some really good results. The other thing we know that when you eat lots, you have insulin levels that go up a lot. And when insulin doesn't ever go back to baseline, that's when we get insulin resistance. And we also know that excess insulin leads to obesity and insulin resistance. So, yeah, a lot of sort of pieces that are kind of playing together here to bring to bear all of these lifestyle diseases that come as a result of how we've chosen to eat, not just what foods, but how often and how and over what period of time. Yeah, Kathy.
This has to do with the question I was gonna ask you too. So, I'm on a diet, I'm trying to lose weight. And Stephanie and I were talking about it. She said, well, you don't eat lots of vegetables. We're trying to do the plate method.
Mhm.
And my husband doesn't want to do any carbs, stay away from carbs. And so the question Stephanie was talking about, well, I need to get my starches in, my sweet potatoes and bread. And you were saying because of it helps build your muscles, like she's having me do some really tough exercises.
Mhm.
She says, I really need those carbs. So I just wonder what have you seen in all your research?
About carbs? Well, eating a paleo diet is what's called a carb restricted diet. It's not low carb. Keto would be very low carb. And there are some people who need to be on a very low carb diet, but most people I find do better on what we call a carb restricted diet, which means getting your carbohydrates from your fruits and vegetables, which is what Stephanie's talking about. And for women, especially middle-aged and older, we tend, in my experience, typically need more carbs than what we might get on a keto or even a paleo diet. So I really want women in that age group and anybody who sort of feels hangry when they try a whole foods diet, make sure you're getting enough root vegetables. Those are going to be the starchier ones like carrots, parsnips, radishes, potatoes, sweet potatoes, kohlrabi, beets, anything that grows in the ground is going to be a starchier vegetable. So just make sure you're getting enough of those. You also, squash could be in that category too, which grows above the ground. But for the most part, we're talking about root vegetables where you're going to get those carbs, and then fruits. But with fruit, especially people with blood sugar issues, you need to limit your fruits. You can't eat 8 or 10 servings of fruit and say, well, I got my fruits and vegetables in, it is all fruit, because of the naturally occurring sugars. And so people with blood sugar issues, I say mostly not more than 2 fruit servings out of the 8 to 10 a day. So it just helps to keep their blood sugars under better control if you're not taking in so much of that naturally occurring sugar from the fruit.
Okay, what about the breads?
Breads are grains. And so,
What kind of bread should I go to?
well, somebody just brought me a sample of a paleo bread. They got it at Natural Grocers that I thought was really good. Let me tell you what it's called here. I cannot, she sent me a picture of the package and I've tried to remember what it's called and I've tried several times and I can't remember. It's called Base Culture. Yeah, here's a picture of what it looks like. Soft sandwich bread, grain-free, gluten-free, preservative-free, dairy-free. That's what it looks like. And it's in the freezer section. And it's actually pretty good. I've never heard of it. Have you ever heard of it? Yeah, this is what it looks like.
What store or?
She found it at Natural Grocers.
Where's that?
And Quad Cities has a Natural Grocers. A
I think it's on
Muscatine.
Kimberly.
Yeah, it's kind of over by Costco, I think.
Oh, that's
Maybe.
on 53rd.
Maybe, I don't, I guess I'm
thought
not.
there was one on Kimberly. but
Well, I
could be
might,
wrong.
you might be right. I don't live there and
Yeah.
my husband's always driving, so I don't pay attention to where he's going. That's my bad, but. So I also want to talk about a couple more books I brought. Wired to Eat is one by Rob Wolf. That talks about turn off cravings, rewire your appetite for weight loss and determine foods that work for you. This is a great book just about eating healthy. This one is a book by James Duke, The Green Pharmacy Guide to Healing Foods. This is really about actually using foods to heal. Like you've heard about cranberry juice when you have urinary tract infection, or tart cherry juice for gout, that sort of thing. So this has got, foods that are more targeted to specific diseases. And it's got some helpful information if you have some specific diseases. And this one is by Dr. Will Cole, called The Inflammation Spectrum: Find Your Food Triggers and Reset Your System. And this is about really an anti-inflammatory diet. So this also is some good information. One of the things I want to mention, it came up when you were just talking about being on a diet, Kathy, is that one of the beauties of eating a paleo diet is I tell people, you eat when you're hungry and you eat until you're full. There's no counting, no exchanges, no weighing, no measuring, no nothing. You just eat foods that are real food, that are whole foods, that are healthy foods, and you don't have to worry about any of that other stuff. And it usually just works beautifully because you get full faster and you stay full longer. So that's the beauty of getting your blood sugar under control, because when your blood sugar falls is when you get oh, I'm hungry, my stomach's growling. And you don't have that because you get a more gradual increase and then you get a more gradual tapering off over 4 to 5 hours. In fact, I learned at an obesity conference I went to some years ago that if you're hungry before 4 to 5 hours have passed, you aren't getting the right mix of macronutrients. Probably too many carbs, not enough proteins and fats. So one of the things I suggest when people have a craving for something sweet or some carbs is try something that's fat, like nuts, like part of an avocado, like some coconut, something that has some fat. Sometimes that will help with those carb cravings or those, those kinds of cravings. Oh, I want something to eat and I just ate an hour ago, kind of a thing, because that's going to have more staying power. It's going to keep you full longer. And so you're likely.
That's a good,
Mhm.
good.
Yes, as long as coconut, no, it's a nut.
Oh,
Actually, but actually it's not really a nut because it's okay on an AIP, an autoimmune protocol, and you can't have nuts. So it's kind of in a category by itself,
okay.
but as long as there's no added sugar.
Mhm.
And you can buy unsweetened shredded coconut. You can put it on things, on your salad, whatever, mix it with some peanut butter, get some good fat there, lots of fat. So, yeah.
I think I need to come and see.
Well, I would love to. That's what I love to do. So, other questions anybody has? All right, well, I'm going to shut off the recording.